It's a great honor to open these sessions for the group. I think this is a very exciting time for us, or a challenging and exciting time. What I want to do today is to give you a quick overview of IEEE TEMS. So let me just bring up my opening by I say a couple of things about myself. As the organizer said, that I am the president of the TEMS. As well, I was the vice president for Computer Societies, in charge of Professional Education Activity Board, and I'm currently on the Board of Governors for Computer Society. I'm also a venture capitalist. I have managed with my partner a capital fund for investment to disruptive technologies. I was a CTO for one of the largest, or the largest, utility company in Canada. And I retired maybe 10 years ago. I have my own consulting company worldwide for power generations, in particular nuclear power generations, to China, Australia, Europe. And I'm on the advisory board for many of the United Nations agencies. Now, many of you are IEEE members. We do have 10 regions around the world. In TEMS, if you see the big pie area, the blue area is region 10. It's our largest regions, followed by region 8 and region 6. Even though region 10 is big, the population also is huge and large numbers. And I think there's a lot of potential for us to grow in region 10 area. In TEMS, our tagline is leaders enabling products and services for good. So for us, there's 5 focus areas that we focus on. One is moving product services from idea to the market. And all of you are probably in that area, had a good idea, but you didn't know how to get it become a product, and how do you make it to become marketable. A product can be service, it can be marketed and sales. And for the large corporations, we help them identify and implementing successful projects and systems. Many of the enterprise systems and large-scale major capital projects require very in-depth experience and knowledge. Many of our members are doing researches in those areas. We also help the company and the corporations to integrate the technologies and capability. Not the technology development itself, but how do you deploy technologies? How do you manage technologies? And how do you maximize the productivities within the corporations? More importantly, we as the community, we try to grow engineers to leaders. Engineers, the best engineer doesn't make the best leaders. It requires many soft skills, many working experiences, and we have many seasoned professional that would help mentoring different aspects of engineering development and advancement. More importantly, our members are focused on balancing the norm between society, government, and regulations. So looking at the technology, how does that balance all the needs of societies? How do you comply to the government regulations? So those are 5 areas. Our members maintain essential engineering management skills that support we support the leadership career with many tools researchers' findings, conferences, events to IEEE members. And we foster the knowledge between academia and industries. That's a pretty big gap. This is one of the TEMS strengths, is we have composed a lot of industries, practitioners, executive, to gap with, as well as with a large number of academias. So the TEMS members are the next generations of leaders. We manage engineering in organization. We do product innovations and design. And we effectively move the product from conceptions to the market. Within TEMS, let me just move this away. Within TEMS, we have 4 vice presidents and four areas. And many of them are here today supporting me. Starting with conference events, that's Sudeendra Koushik, and he's also a keynote today. We also have membership marketing and communications vice president, that's Ravikiran Annaswamy. And we also have the publication and magazines vice president, and by the name of Gus Gaynor. So that's Ravi, and that's Gus. For those who don't know, Gus is 99 years old young this year. He's one of the oldest members, and he's been in the industry for the longest time and serving in our communities. We have a new VP. His name is Rich Evans in technical activities. Speaking of technical activities, I think that's one of the areas where most of you young professional and academia students can find your passions and your interests. We bring together people with a special interest group to form a special interest group and technical committees. Right now, we have global standard for decentralized AI. I'll talk a bit about this here because this is something very unique for TEMS, really addressing the need of the industries. I call them Industry 4.0, and I'll talk about it in the next slide. We also have a group that focuses on technology for good, and that is one of the fine examples is that we partner with United Nations ITU, and that's International Telecom Unions, for the conference they have called AI for Goods in Geneva, and we bring our members who specialize in AI technologies for good to present their paper during the conference or just before the conference. We have a group that focuses on design and engineering processes, and more importantly, we have a group that focuses on equity, partnership, and minority for the inclusiveness. Nowadays, I think that's one of the very major issues around the world. We're starting two more technical activity. One is really our strength, entrepreneurships and innovations. We have a large number of members that is in entrepreneurship areas, and a lot of members are innovation researchers. We also started student activities committees to provide some of the events like hackathon to cater to the students' need and the student development. So different awards, different competitions. We're starting to organize with 2 or 3 director of innovation. Now, I mentioned Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 really is it started probably 4 or 5 years ago in World Economic Forum. What it is recognizing is that the industry is now moving into not just the technologies, it's technologies bring to life, and not just technology by itself. It's actually fusing the technology, such as with AI and blockchain. How do you make AI distributed wide world, not centralized in the big machines? So those are many interesting areas, and that is a huge topics. And there's a lot of conferences, and many of our conferences have industry forum that focus on Industry 4.0. We did that last year in 2 or 3 of our conferences. The industry forum was focused on Industry 4.0. We have a lot of good discussions and bringing the industry people to bring their issues and their pain point to the researchers. The other area I want to focus, highlight on, as I mentioned, is the entrepreneurship. We do in TEMS. Our entrepreneurship programs activities embedded in our conferences. Last year, in TEMS Conference 2019 in Atlanta, we have pitching contest, startup innovation centers in Georgia Tech came and participate in the top 10 for competitions, and we award winners during the conference, and that was very exciting for the young student and young professional that has a great idea to shine. Last year, I also invited to the largest event in IEEE called Slingshot 2019 in Singapore, judging the top 100 startup out of thousands in Singapore. And IEEE is a partner, entrepreneurship is a partner called IEEE Next or N3XT. And one of the winner was the robotic arm. The winner of the contest received close to $1 million of prizes and equivalent values. So it was very much well attended, and it's cooperated with the Singapore government. On the other extreme, we also focus on developing world. We partner with IEEE Smart Villages, which has a project to bring electricity and technologies to those areas that is being developed in the third world countries. We have many projects, and we collaborate with them. Our strength is in enterprise educations. That was 2 areas that we contribute significantly with we call them ISV. And we try to create entrepreneurship so that they can create employment and sustain their business in electricity and education. Here are many projects that we did in both in Africa and in India as well as South America. If you see that, I think there's about 6 projects going on right now in India. And some of our members are involved in supporting those projects, all those projects, provide electricity to the original electricity. So it's another very exciting aspect of work. We also participate in one of the largest innovative project managers award. We currently are working on MOU with Dubai, government Dubai, and there for competitions in project management, individually or by corporations. And it was last December when we started to working with them to sign MOU to support their so our member can participate in those competitions. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that we are very fortunate that we have a very strong team in India, and they are now 1 year in anniversaries. And the India team has done extremely successful in growing TEMS, in getting our value and our offering out to many of the academia and industries. And there's a little video, but I'm not too sure if it's playable. Sound come through, but I'll do it quickly. It's a 1 minute video. We started campaign called I Love TEMS, and this is a part of our first anniversary.
I love TEMS.
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 I love IEEE TEMS.
I love TEMS.
I love TEMS.
For us. So that's the end of my speech, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
As we all know that it's a big question for so many students, what to do after graduation, employment or entrepreneurship. So be ready to get the correct guidance for this. Our next talk is about employment versus entrepreneurship, how to choose. For this talk, we have Mr. Sudeendra Koushik, sir, who is the chairperson of IEEE TEMS India and the chief innovator and the co-founder at Prasu. So without taking much of your time, let's start this session. Over to you, Sudeendra, sir.
Thank you. I think I need to be enabled for content sharing. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you, Andy. And for those of you who do not know, Andy is in Canada, and it's quite late at night. So when initially I was requested to request Andy for his talk, for his time, I was hesitating, and I hesitatingly asked Andy about it, and he was more than happy to take part. He said, no, that's no problem. I will do it. So I think a wonderful gesture from his side to match up to what the team is doing in India. Thank you, Andy. And we have another colleague apart from Ravikiran, also from Europe, who woke up early on a Saturday, Robert, whom you will hear right after me. Thank you, Robert, as well. Thanks, Ravi, for joining. I just take about 8 minutes to talk on this topic, and then we can go to the next one. So this is a little video I want to share, and it summarizes where we are today. So usually people miss it, so I'm playing again. So the reason I showed this is because basically this is a wake-up call. So many of us are in the state where we think, yeah, things were different in 2019, even in beginning of 2020, and in sooner than later it will come back to the same way. Maybe not exactly the same way. In my words, the what will remain the same, but the how might change. And in that sense, it's a good wake-up call for many of us in many ways, if you make the best use of it and come out in flying colors. So the topic I was asked to speak on was the future of employment in terms of should I be an entrepreneur, should I be an employee? I think there is no one answer. Everybody cannot be employees, everybody cannot be entrepreneurs, but you need to figure out a little bit of understanding and experiment, and then see what is most suitable for you. But having said that, there are some anchors that you can use to do that decision making. Education, of course, is the first and foremost building block that we need to understand. And with that comes experience. So once we get to our degrees and masters and so on, we can start to work and build experience for ourselves. And with that, we develop certain amount of expertise over the years. So in this 4E model, which I'll come to, education is one, experience is the other, expertise. So this all will take time. So you can more or less say the x-axis is time in this case. But once you have education and you can build some experience, you can become a good employee, right? Employees have lower risk compared to an entrepreneur, a more stable, more predictable. Somebody else in the organization always tries to make the decisions for you and so on. But with some more experience, you can become a better employee or a more valued employee or more significant employee in a company. But with experience, you can also become an entrepreneur. Like I said, the major difference is you get to make all the decisions. And if you like that, it is good. And if you don't like that, it is not good. Employee, you can take leave, you can take holiday, you can take vacation more easily than an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur, you are basically 24/7. Robert is going to talk about it. Ravi can talk about it. Andy can vouch for it. There is nothing called off time for an entrepreneur. If the housekeeping doesn't come to your office, you have to make sure the office is clean, which means you could be cleaning the office, right? So anything to everything, you have to get it done, especially when you're starting up and when you're small. So with more experience, typically it is found that there are more successful entrepreneurs who are experienced rather than fresh ones. It's not to discourage anyone, but it is proven by data that some experience always helps because it helps in making you better decisions. The third piece is expertise. So as an employee, as an entrepreneur, you can still build expertise. And the last bit which you can become is a consultant. Consultant is one who has a lot of experience, quite a good education, and more importantly, expertise in a particular area for which he or she is being sought after. So obviously you can think and understand that expertise is not the first thing you do after college, right? That can still be. So when you think of entrepreneur, it's different. You're responsible in managing other people. Consultant is a kind of entrepreneur who is managing maybe less than 2-3 people, perhaps sometimes only himself or herself, right? So you can be a group bunch of consultants, you can be a single consultant. So whether you want to call it an entrepreneur or not, you're on your own. But that comes with some expertise, which I was talking to somebody today also in the morning, that when you do something very well, and when you somehow manage to be in the top 3, you can be a good consultant. You can be a sought after consultant because people should come to you for something which they don't get otherwise. Okay. So education, experience, and expertise are the 3 E's, which can get you an employee or help you become an entrepreneur or become a consultant. Now there is a 4th variation, which is called intrapreneur, right? And that becomes an advantage for people who want less risk, but a flavor of entrepreneurship. So intrapreneur, if you today type in Microsoft Word, it says it's a spelling mistake, and it is not. It's a well-researched topic. A lot of things are going on in this area, which is basically a company allows you to operate like an entrepreneur, but within the company. So if you compare what we discussed as employee and entrepreneur, employee is very stable, very safer. Entrepreneur is quite risky. Everything is on. Intrapreneur is, as I've mentioned in the slide, is in between. There's a higher degree of risk compared to an employee, but the lower degree of risk compared to an entrepreneur because the funds are given by the company many times. The resources are given by the company. Maybe some decisions are also made by some of the higher ups, but it gives you a flavor of being not completely safe, but not completely on your own and risky, but somewhere in between. But the 4th E, if you're wondering which is the 4th E in the 4E model, education, experience, and expertise, is exposure. That's where what Andy talked about makes sense, and you as TEMS ambassadors make sense to you. This will not come from education. This will not come from experience. This will not come because you are an expert in something. This will come from exposing yourself to people, a wide variety of people. Just look at today. We have myself, we have Andy, we have Ravikiran, we have Robert, and we have Dr. Ruchi. Now, all of us are very different in what we do. Now, you don't get to meet these people just because you're in TEMS, you're able to meet such wonderful people, right? And that is what exposure. You don't know what you don't know is reduced by exposing yourself to people and listening to topics that is not taught to you in school and college and at work. When I say, for example, if you read books, don't read books in your area of expertise. Read books, suppose if you are in mechanical engineering, read books in finance, read books in strategy. So that's how you get exposed to new things, because then the boundary of what you know starts to extend. And that's the beauty of TEMS is you get to meet really wonderful people and literally across the world. Just yesterday, I made a connect at Panama, a student like you who wants to run a part of the industrial forum with us. And that's the beauty of being an ambassador or being a part of TEMS as such. So education, experience, expertise, and exposure. Exposure is the key because it's a kind of multiplier. It speeds up everything, it accelerates your learning, it accelerates your experience, it accelerates and expands your networking, and hence you can very well become a well sought after and well educated, well-rounded professional. Now, if you look, it's an interdisciplinary exposure that we're talking about. So classically, we said there is the horizontal blue line is the width of education that we get. Typically, say undergraduate or masters in electronics and communication, for example, or computer science, and so on and so forth. So you get an orange line in that, which is your supposed to be an area of specialization. But in interdisciplinary exposure, by design, you don't do this. You do this instead. You have a range of topics and you have a varied depth of expertise in each of them. For example, I'm a systems engineer for a big part of my career. So I knew hardware, I knew software. I knew hardware more than software. And I knew systems, I knew product management, I knew picture performance, are different topics. Now, that's where TEMS plays a role because as the topic says, technology and engineering management, we say everything that is needed to make a product or a service, right? Leaders enabling product and services for good. So we know the end in mind is good. Good for whom? Good for humanity. And whatever needs to happen between the head and good, we make it happen. And that's the future of skills as well. And that's where you need to be adaptive in your skill set as well. So there's a lot of stuff on TEMS TV. I just took some old snapshot of what was there. There is much more content here. Perhaps Ravi can touch about it, which you can talk about. But there is enough and more to learn and be helping yourself to understand a little bit more about expertise. So that's basically what I wanted to share. Remember, education, expertise, and your experience together with exposure makes you what you want to. When you meet people, you get to emulate them, you get to learn from them, you get to ask them, and that's how you learn. Okay. Thank you so much, Divya. I'm handing you back the screen.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one question by the Visar Shah. It is good time to have a startup in this current situation.
Okay, my philosophy is very simple. Let me give you a small anecdote. In the 80s, people used to say it's very difficult to find a job after education. In the 90s, they told it's very difficult to get a job after education. 2000, they said the same. 2010 and 2020, they are saying the same. I say if you are good in something, there is always a job for you. So even the same applies for startup. There is more support today, yes. So if you have, that doesn't make the quality of your proposal, the business idea that you have, that does not take away from that. And just not to discourage you, but you should know the facts in being a startup is 90 to 95% of the startups don't make it. And one of the prime reasons is they build what nobody wants. So if you have a good idea, yes, it's a very good time to do a startup and scale as well.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one more question from Manan Joshi. Sir, can you just brief us more about an entrepreneur, just like giving an example?
Okay, entrepreneur is like this. Suppose I am working for, I'll just take a name. I have no space. Okay, let me take Philips because we work with and Robert also worked with. So when I'm working with Philips, suppose I come up with an idea to make a product. So it's like a handheld CT scanner. Okay, it doesn't exist today, so I'm making up one. And now I go to my management, they say, I do my homework. I say, this is how the idea works. This is the amount of money it takes, but this is the benefit that we have. This is a business case and everything. Suppose my management sort of likes that idea and say they want to invest in it. Now, two things can happen. If they reject, I can resign from the job, go out and start a startup because I believe in it. Now, when the management believes in it, they give me support. They say, okay, we'll support you. We will relieve you of your current duties. We'll give you time to do this. It will be funded by us. You can run it as a business, separate business. And if it grows big, then it will be a business unit by itself. Maybe that's the way you can understand entrepreneurs. So they groom entrepreneurs within the organization because that gives them the freedom to operate compared to a regular business, but they also have a risk that it might not work, and the company understands that. I know of companies, bigger multinational companies, who have gone one step further. They said, you know what, we like this idea. We will support you. Why don't you take it as a business startup and you start up within our company and you can have a 50% stake in it. You can put some money and you take a stake in it as well. So that's what entrepreneur essentially is.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Sir, can you highlight the funding opportunities for startup?
Money has never been a problem, especially in the last 4 years. I mean, like Andy said, he himself is an investor, and across the globe they do that. So there is always, just think like this: when you go to a businessman and you give them an idea how to grow their business or make their business better, any reasonable businessman will see sense and invest in you. The question is always, do they see value as much as you see value in it? When we start up, we find it more attractive than person who has to invest. When you or me have to buy a 10 rupees toothpaste, we think before we buy, right? So same way an investor thinks what is the value. So if you create value, there is enough people who can invest in your startup.
Okay, sir. So similar kind of question by Deepnagar. Funding opportunities for projects.
Yes, like I said, if you have an idea which helps a business, no reasonable businessman will say no to it. There is nobody who says, I don't want my business to grow. So you have to think from the business investor's perspective, why and what they would invest for, and you will get the benefits of investing.
Thank you so much, sir, for patiently answering all the questions and for this enlightening talk. Hope it would be helpful to all the participants to make the right choice for their career. Now let's march further in this event. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much, by Helen Keller. Now it's time to get the information regarding IEEE TEMS and how it can prove to be a golden opportunity. So get ready for the next informative session, Digital Transformation and TEMS, a Global Opportunity, which is going to be conducted by Robert Bierwolf. Mr. Robert Bierwolf is the president of the conference at IEEE TEMS and the research associate at the Center of Technology and Innovation Management. Now, without wasting your time, I would like to redirect to Mr. Robert, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Let me see if I can. All right. And let me immediately tie into the remarks that Sudeendra just made. There's a book out there, an old book actually, it's called Thriving on Chaos. Some might know it, but it really takes a mindset to understand that, and I lived through it, that the more problems there are, the more opportunity there is. So don't expect for you to be able to operate well, that everything needs to be in order. The less order there is, the more chance there is to create order. So today I'll do a little bit of talk. There's an agenda, but I've put a subline between it and said, remember, it's just a guideline. And with many things, they are just guideline. You have to make your own judgment call how to make a chocolate out of it. That's like a Dutch expression that doesn't translate well in English, does it? But you need to make something creative out of it. My background is diverse, so to speak. I graduated from Delft University, electrical engineering, as many of you work with many large corporations like NCR, Philips, that Sudeendra worked for too. And rightfully so, in any large corporation, there are so many problems that there is always an opportunity to thrive. And that's also why there's the little Lego person in the right top corner. I sometimes joke, and the best joke I can make is when I'm at a birthday party, I'm wearing a three-piece suit, and then somebody asks, what's your day job? And then I tell them I'm a garbage cleaner. I do actually clean garbage. That is to say, I do interim management, I do project and program management, which 9 out of 10 times means you have to resolve a problem. So having said that, my link to TEMS really is about how do I communicate and foster changes, and how do I communicate the experience that I've made? How do I get people to move in the right direction? This aligns with the fields of interest that you see in black bold characters, the stuff that I used to do, being engaged in product development, being engaged in project and program management. Indeed, also having made the transition from engineer to management. And nowadays, I'm much more moving into the fields of research, of management sciences, and organization development. And not to be forgotten, the human aspects thereof. Many of you are indeed member of IEEE, but there are even more people in the world, of course, that have not heard of IEEE. Even when I fly into the US for an IEEE board meeting, I get stopped at customs and people ask me why you're here, and say I'm here for an IEEE meeting, and then the custom officer says never heard of, and I always ask them, but you use Wi-Fi, don't you? Which nowadays, of course, the majority of the world and the population does. And then I'll tell them, guess what? Wi-Fi is an IEEE standard, the 802.11 series. At one point in time, some folks in the NCR system engineering laboratories in the Netherlands were talking about Radio LAN. I was there in 1986, 1987, at which time a guy came back from the top floor from having had a presentation and said, you know, they have Radio LAN now upstairs. And it took some 30 years later for the engineers who are in the picture here, Fix Hayes and Case Links, to be awarded with the IEEE medal. And the IEEE milestone was put up in the municipality house of the city of Nieuwegein, just underneath Utrecht. So if you travel anywhere in the world and somebody says, I haven't heard of IEEE, you have an easy way to explain it nowadays. Let's see if my still works. Right, so today we're in a new world. That is to say, we figured out a new acronym, the VUCA world, where everything is changing. And everything is getting smart, isn't it? And so we have to feel that we need to move and transform. In particular, in the business world, we talk about the disruption of existing businesses. And so transformation has become a necessity if you don't want to get extinct. Which ties again back to the old adagium that says, adopt, adapt, or perish. At the same time, old Stone Age ideas are becoming interesting again. And this is an example of a Siemens site in Germany where they use volcanic stone to store energy, which is a nice thing to do. So it really requires you to rethink. You'll see the word rethink coming along a number of times. And sometimes you just have to experience digital transformation. I was joining an event last year. I'm wearing the goggle on to see how the application worked to investigate a crime scene situation, but then using virtual reality, which allowed people to investigate crimes without the necessity for each and every individual to go to the crime scene to potentially disrupt the scene, of course. Meanwhile, as I said, the changes are going on, and existing companies have to rethink how they sustain in the current world, but also have to address how to extend their life or reason for existence for the coming years, which leads to technology road mapping, understanding the time horizons where you need to look into where your business is going. Because if you only think of your business as it is today, you will not survive tomorrow. We now live in a time where we think of XaaS, meaning anything as a service. So you servitize all kinds of products and services into the digital areas. Again, this gives you lots of opportunity because you can rethink anything. I mentioned VUCA, and I mentioned the situation where we think much is changing today to the extent where so much is happening that we think it is difficult to grasp. But do remember that there was an article that was entitled "The Most Technologically Progressive Decade of the Century," and the question would be to you, what decade do you think it was? And actually, there's been research been done onto it, and it goes back to the 30s. So the historian Alexander Wield did that research, and he noticed that the actual article is not from this era, not from this decade. No, it's from the 30s, which is kind of interesting to see. But it also tells you perceiving change is always being seen as very radical by the people in a particular time frame. So we're making everything smart. We have the smart cities going on. Andy mentioned Industry 4.0. We're smartizing our energy situation and yielding. Our societies are becoming smart. Japan calls it Society 5.0. And the next step really is smart humanity. We'll be integrating many technology parts with ourselves. An interesting presentation I joined was in 2018 in Chicago, where Professor John Rogers showed how the electronics and sensors came together. For me, it was interesting because I was seeing like 30 years of progression in development of sensor technology. When I was a student at Delft University, I had a professor, Professor Simon Middelhoek, who taught us as students to think about smart sensors. And in those days, smart sensors was already the phenomenon of having a sensor with some form of calculation and processing on chip. Nowadays, if you think of smart sensors, don't be mistaken, because it's very, very, very multidisciplinary. It requires material science. It requires electrical engineering, computer engineering, chemistry engineering, biomedical engineering, mechanical engineering, medicine science, neurological science. So there's a lot of different fields that come together, which allow you to deal with prenatal babies being born, and without them being fully cabled with sensors. You just put a sticker on their forehead with a sensor that is able to transfer lots of information. And the sensor business is being a large, the right-hand side, you see a chip with the Lakers, the Los Angeles Lakers, the basketball team. And why is sensors a big thing for the Lakers? Because it allows them to let the athletes perform at maximum performance by measuring them completely individually and tailoring the liquids that they take in during the game also on a personal basis. This is how far sensors go nowadays, and this is why large corporations put in large money in this field. So again, you need to rethink. The same goes with a typical US sport like baseball. You can measure a lot. Start measuring before you can start learning. And of course, we all know the development cycle things take. We are very enthusiastic at the very beginning. We then get to some dissolution before it becomes true reality and creates value. Having said that, 2 years ago we had the Amsterdam Drone Week, where drones were becoming reality, to the sense that they were at real scale and so forth. which is interesting because it's been talked a lot. I mean, you go back to the 1960s, where there was a comic series on television called The Jetsons. And right now we're starting to move in the world of the Jetsons because last year at the Geneva Motor Show, there was the pre-sale happening of the PAL-V combined car and helicopter. And actually, this company already exists since 1999. So it took them 2 decades to actually get all this far. Pre-sale started last year. And as of next month, August 2020, this vehicle and flight device is allowed on the Dutch road. That is interesting. And of course, it took them longer than they could have ever imagined, because you need to get all the approvals and licenses and whatever. It's not just technology. There's lots of regulations involved, as Andy also mentioned. But it's happening. It doesn't come cheap. The cheapest model go for 299,000, and the first models actually are being sold for 499,000 euros. But it does go at a fair speed. It does 160 kilometers an hour on the road, and it can fly at a speed of 180 kilometers an hour. Still, you need some space, of course, near to your home if you want to really use it. Again, having said or mentioned licenses or allowance to be road, there's much more to it than just the technology. It has to fit in within the infrastructure. It has to fit in within all the rules and regulations. So it isn't as easy as you might think of just creating a gadget, so to speak. Smart mobility is moving along. Navigation systems have been there for a long time. Actually, in 1994, the first in-factory built-in navigation systems for the BMW 7 Series came out, which were produced by Philips. And today you have your navigation system completely free on your mobile phone, right? But if you understood how much it took and how much it costed at those days, when you were to order your BMW 7 Series and you wanted navigation system in your car as an option, you could tick a box on the list and say, I want navigation system, which costed at that time 13,000 Deutschmark, which isn't cheap as compared to what you're getting now, right, on your mobile phone. And now also TomTom is where the Philips car systems part of navigation went to, is putting some substantial money in trying to understand how artificial intelligence can help to improve their navigation systems. Understanding that we are putting a lot of technology into the workplace, and we need to think it through because there are some implications there that relate to both reliability, it has to work, and it relates to safety very much. Again, that's one of your, whenever you're a trained engineer, you understand whatever I make needs to be safe. And having self-driving car requires things like real-time communications, hence 5G, and actually 6G is right now already started in developments at Eindhoven Technical University. And whereas they are already busy developing 6G, today, July 25th, 2020, 5G has been turned on in the Netherlands. So the 3 major operators, KPN, T-Mobile, and Vodafone, have switched on their 5G masts because last week they have been awarded the license, or the auction has been happening, which provided the Dutch government again a nice fund less than with the 4G auction, but still 1.23 billion euros. Meanwhile, technology is progressing. This is IBM's quantum computing. And you might want to reconsider what books are you going to read to your newborn kids. And the book in the middle, Fundamental Universal Physics, is the one that I was being taught when I was at Delft University as a student, as one of the physics courses on quantum physics. But today there are the alternative books for the most youngest one in our world. And you might want to rethink what am I gonna tell my little kids. Meanwhile, do understand everything hinges together. If there's data involved, it goes all the way up through all kinds of chains and mechanisms and so forth. Nothing stands on itself. Products no longer exist in isolation. It simply doesn't. Which also implies the necessity for interoperability, but also requires the necessity for security, for privacy, for secure data communications, and so forth. Because you don't want your body to be hacked now, do you? Similarly, we're moving into the smart cities, but if you look at the number of type of standards that would be applicable in such a situation, you see the field is large. But smart cities is still about people. You still need to think of how is the city going to look like? What does it imply? It takes more than just the technological view. So we need to rethink how we act and operate in conjunction. We also have a new word for robots, right? We call them nowadays cobots, because you will be working with them together in the smart factories of today. And as I mentioned, AI is moving up. In January 2017, there was a report that said there was 3.8 billion invested since 2012. And I think that's a large number. But the 3.8 billion became almost 12 billion just a year later. So there's serious investments going on in technology, which of course will then lead to a further rollout into applications and use. And even a year later, or half a year later, it went up to 66. Similarly, in the healthcare industry, we are all getting older, which implies there'll be a necessity to deal with all our aging issues, health, sickness, abilities or disabilities. So again, it's another opportunity. And of course, some people are get afraid and see the machines becoming super intelligent and us humans being become irrelevant. I don't know, I leave it up to you to think of how the future is going to look like. You have a stake at it. And of course, it's always a matter of perspective. I like Dilbert, but that has to be, that is due to the fact that I have many years of working for US based companies. And if you look at the future, this is a slide that was made by Stephen Ebaraki, who showed where the new jobs are going to be according to the World Economic Forum. So again, there's lots of technology emerging, which also implies new jobs will come along. Having said that, I've presented this or this article before, and the interesting part really is here that in the Netherlands, in order to grow a kilogram of tomatoes, we require a little over 9 liters of water. In China, though, they require 283 liters of water, which means an order of magnitude is to be gained if you grow your tomatoes smartly. So this is done through technology, using smart agriculture, controlling all of the parameters that make the plant grow, which actually led to another startup, Plant Lab, who have just raised 20 million for vertical farms. And the interesting thing about vertical farms is, what was it again? They require a total floor space, which can also go upwards, of course. That's the whole idea of vertical planting. And if your floor space adds up to 2 soccer fields, you can provide 100,000 citizens every day with 200 grams of vegetables. Which means there's a whole change going on, because that also means you don't need to transport all those vegetables. You can produce them where the people live. You can go up in the air and you can reach your 2 soccer fields of floor space easily. And you don't need fertile ground as the old farming system required. But you control how the plant grows: light, humidity, food, temperature, etc. When I was a student, we talked about technology like side-looking airborne radar in order to indeed see how crops were growing and so forth. Highly difficult. Today, we can do much more flexible and easy with drones. And the drone information doesn't require difficult information or image processing or radar signal processing as it used to do in the times of SLAR. But we nowadays have much sensors that we can deploy anywhere, such that you can even do predictive modeling, but you can also have the information of the drone be sent to your big truck or farmer's equipment, and for each and every plant determine how much food it needs to get. Hence the waste goes of whatever materials go down. So what is it that we actually farm? Or what are we harvesting? Again, there's a change that has happened. We are now harvesting data before the crop. There's lots of data going on in things that were called farming. And it's even worse. The crop will have left the farm and will have been sold even before that, and before even the farmer knows what she's going to earn with it. And that's because of how the whole ecosystem is working, which also tells you that if you don't do it right, the farmer's earning will be driven down to the bottom, which implies there's a necessity to think about your ethics, think about social responsibility, think about sustainable development. So again, you need to rethink how things hinge together, how it works, and how to collaborate together. Talking about AI, this is Gert Leonard who made a presentation. At some point, we'll get a difference, and we'll talk about rather than the Intel Inside logo, we'll have the human inside. But it does call for the necessity to address ethics. How do we work together with the machines that we are creating? I don't know if any of you still remember Rubik's cubes. I've ever seen the Rubik's cube. The idea is to bring the colors all back and at each side. The fastest human who can resolve a Rubik's cube does it in, from the top of my head, in 4.49 seconds. which means you have to have you're really moving your hands fast in order to resolve the cube. Now, the robot, any bunch of students can program a robot, and they do it in 0.38 seconds. So if there's an algorithm involved, robots, machines can simply do it faster. And they can even do skills faster. I mean, this is a Jenga game. You try and do this, it probably makes you drop the tower, but the robot won't, because it also has tactile information, machine learning algorithms, and so forth. Still, we need to understand how to make AI work for us, as opposed to not understanding it anymore. Here's a little gadget. This is from 2011, where they showed that a little miniature robot on a bike was able to drive and move around. You might think that's nice, that's a nice gadget, but the thinking is, how do you apply it? This is, everybody knows the Boston Dynamics robot called Spot, the little dog, and what they have now just recently done. In Italy, a team has devised an algorithm such that Spot now becomes a ninja. It can walk across a beam of only 6 centimeters width, and do so without dropping down. If you put wind against it or whatever, the algorithms are so smart that they can balance it out and make it cross. So that's an interesting development again. What does it lead to? You saw the robot biking. This is now a bike that has a smart self-steering engine in it, and it has been devised in particularly for the elderly, because in the traffic, the cyclists, the ones that get most hurt, are the elderly people. So this bike now allows you to safely drive as an elderly person, because the bike is being balanced by an algorithm and some engines that are around the steering wheel. So it limits the injuries and gives the elderly more freedom. Again, smart mobility, our cars are all talking to one another, your data gets shared. It can be done in many ways. The car manufacturers are much busy in it, because they understand we're not just making cars, but we have to think about how the cars operate in the society. And again, it's a matter of rethinking the situation that you are facing, which led to the Uber and Lyft of this world. I'm not saying, I'm making no judgment call about the labor conditions of the drivers here, but it tells you, if you rethink the situation, you can create a different type of service. Again, you need to take them all into perspective, because whatever you do affects another part of the ecosystem. Yeah, more sides to the coin is where this shows two things about AI and robots. One, on the right hand side, it's called remote surgery, where lots of robots are involved, but the surgeon can be at the other side of the hemisphere, which obviously requires a low latency connection, because otherwise your life might be endangered. At the same time, the left hand side, today we can have your driving behavior be monitored, and if you allow that to be done, then you get a discount on your insurance fee. So the car will communicate to the insurance company what your driving style is, how fast you drive, where you drive too fast, or how hard you brake, how hard you take the corners, which all add up to the model that tells the insurance company whether you're a high-risk driver or whether you're a low-risk driver. And as such, you can get even up to 35% discount on your insurance. So there's a necessity to change, as I mentioned at the beginning. And even the accountants are much aware. This is the Dutch Financial Times, and on the front page it said the education of the accountants is not very well prepared for the digital future. But it also implies to other type of jobs, of course. The accountancy, the notaries, and the question becomes, who's next? Meanwhile, lots of funds are being poured into the robotization, in this case for the healthcare. As we understand, we are all growing older and we need to rethink that situation of providing medical support. Again, we then start to measure all kinds of things. You put on your Fitbit and we gain all kinds of data for you. And we can even make them so small that you might not even be noticing them. This is from this month's issue of IEEE Spectrum. They can now miniaturize a camera to fit an insect. So next time a fly comes around, you don't know whether it's a fly or whether it's monitoring you. And it can even become smaller at a nano level. They make nano cars from molecules, which could bring medication to certain parts of your body. All in all, it means there's more involved than just technology. We come into the issue of security, we come into the issue of privacy, which leads to the question of ethics. And because we are becoming more integral, it becomes even more pressing to start discussing that and not just letting it happen. And that is not unknown. There's another Moore's law, not the one that you've been taught about, the doubling of the chip capacity, but this is the one that says as technology increases, so does the social impact. And we need to really be responsive to that. The next best thing we need to address is to have explainable AI. I can tell you from practice that's already quite difficult, even for the municipality that I live in. They use systems to tell me how much tax I need to pay, but if I compare it to my neighbors and I see a big difference, then I cannot explain why it is, because in the civil servant's mind, they say, but the system says is of course insufficient for me as a citizen or even for my neighbor. So we have created guidelines again. IEEE set up the set for ethically aligned design. I would like to emphasize and call it, just like security by design, ethics by design. You have thought it through. When I was a young engineer at NCR, if we were to write a specification for any kind of piece of product, we had to address a section. And the section was called RASUI, which stood for reliability, availability, serviceability, usability, and installability. In those days, elements that the typical young engineer wouldn't think about. So the standard prescribed, you shall address these issues in your specification. And if you don't address them, your specification would not even be reviewed. It would just be rejected. And I guess we've come to a situation where we need to add 2 more elements to such mandatory requirements, which is indeed security and which is ethics. IEEE also has its code of conduct, which already encapsulates or embraces it to some extent, but we really need to think it through. Data, technology, ethics, and our society hinge together. This is an article from yesterday's financial news, where indeed the individualization of insurance policies tailored to a specific person because of his or her risk profile is being addressed. And another professor here is responding and saying, beware, because if you move that way, you also take away the principles that were underneath an assurance, which is we jointly share a specific risk. So there's more than just the technology challenges. Sure, they are there. Sure, they must be addressed, but there's simply more to it. Just don't only believe what IEEE says. Broaden your view. Look at what McKinsey just wrote in July. Look at what Gartner says, where it's going. You'll find elements back in particular in the McKinsey report on technology road mapping, technology management, but even managing the technology people. Which brings me back to the slide that, or the mention that Andy made, what is society management, engineering and society management is about. We have a broad field which basically brings together lots of elements. This is a word cloud that was generated by Trul Dime. Trul Dime is the editor-in-chief of the IEEE Technology and Engineering Management Journal. All the articles together, if you put them all together and you look for the common words, this is what the picture creates. And you'll see some bigger blobs of words coming back. If you unwrap it, these are the so-called classifications. The yellow ones are the ones that I'm most interested in and that I'm engaging on. But again, as also Sudeendra said, look beyond your borders. That makes it interesting. From strategy to transferring the technology to entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, it all comes together. If you then combine it with the IEEE initiatives that are going on in the various areas, and the interesting part of TEMS is it brings it all together. So we're moving into a digital transformation area, and technology management and management methodology is key therein, which tells to me becoming a member of the society is a good thing in order to hear, listen, see the various perspectives that there are. And again, also alluding to what Andy was saying with the UN and ITU, we are now living at a golden opportunity. On the one hand, IEEE from its side has already for some time claimed we are trying to advance technology for humanity. At the same time, the UN tells us we need to think of the sustainable development and put the technology at work that's in that way, which goes beyond trying just to sell technology in order to make a profit. So there's more to it than just technology funds. There's an ecosystem called our world. Having said that, I hope I have to gain some time back from the delay in our session. So there we are.
Thank you so much, sir, for a wonderful speech. We have a couple of questions here for you. First question is, are there any travel grants available in TEMS for students to attend conferences?
I will refer that question to the new VP of Conferences, whereas I have been VP of Conference for TEMS from 2015 until recent. Now it's the honor for Sudeendra to respond to that. But preempting his answer, that'll be on a case-by-case basis and also on a per conference basis, that it may or may not happen. But Sudeendra may want to chip in here.
Okay, sir.
I missed the first part of it, Robert.
The question was if there was funds available for students or others to attend conferences.
Yes, so probably we will talk about it in detail. So there are some student chapter related policies and frameworks we are rolling out to incentivize your activity and engagement. And this is also in the consideration of how it can, one of the awards or incentives can be to let you attend conferences for free. We will connect back to you on that. Dr. Shrikant from TEMS India is working on this framework. We hope to release it this month, and you will hear from us on this.
Thank you so much, sir. Next question for the Robert, sir. What can be the biggest challenge in this digital transformation as of now in this post-pandemic era?
I wouldn't yet dare to say that we are in a post-pandemic era. I think we're still in the midst of it. But the interesting thing about COVID-19 is that it has brought about and accelerated many transformations. The most visible one has been the mere fact that we're using WebEx here right now. And I've been using conference calling and video calling ever since, what is it, 1994 already. But now, all of a sudden, because of the pandemic situation, for example, all of the education at universities and even at primary schools made that transformation, which previously was always said, no, cannot be done, takes 2-3 years, and now the sense of urgency was so high that it led to an acceleration of such change. So to answer the question, the challenge is continuously to rethink the situation and see what is a viable way forward. So there is no, there is never a one-size-fits-all answer. It's always a case-by-case basis, and that's what we have to deal with.
Yeah, so this is Andy here. Maybe I can add a couple colors to that. So I think one of the things that's really, I guess everyone would know now with all the news going on, that many of the company, large corporations, I think starting with Twitter first, I think, announcing that the worker will no longer require to come to office again going forward. That means that you can do virtual work without going actually to the physical locations. So you could hire by a company in America without you being in America and getting the full. It's almost impossible in the past. In the past, you would have to be able to travel to attend meeting, attend corporate meeting. But it's not just Twitter. In the last month alone, there are literally 100 companies that announced that they different degrees of working remotely. As recently as Siemens, which is the largest engineering firm, supplies, stating that you have choice from now on. Even after the pandemic is over, you do not have to come to office. So think about the potential that disruption to the world. Now, if I'm a student in Africa, I can literally work for Finland and not having to apply for immigration and landing status, and you would get at same competition. So it is a very different world going forward.
Yeah, and the concept of borders has changed. I guess that's what you're saying, Andy.
What border?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, very well said that many companies have allowed their employees to work from home, that too permanently. Yes, so we have another question. Will AI be helpful to the patients suffering from the pandemic?
Say again?
Will AI be helpful for the patients in this pandemic?
Yes, as you may have seen or may have noticed, many journals have opened up their articles that are normally hidden behind a payment wall for the sake of research on COVID-19 to be accelerated. And there's a professor from the University of Utrecht who's also made available his searching algorithm to allow more easily to sift through all of the many papers in order to find the right ones that helps a particular researcher. So yes, AI is being used already and applied to accelerate a search for the cure measures and whatever that is required to manage the whole COVID-19 situation.
Thank you so much, sir, for providing such a wonderful information regarding digital transformation and joining us here for today.
You're most welcome.
So now let's move towards our next session, which is on electrical vehicle in India. For conducting this session, we have Mr. Ravikiran Annaswamy with us. He is the founder and CEO of Numosity Technologies and works closely with global programs like Founder Institute and Unreasonable Institute. He is on the global team of IEEE 5G and former Vice President, Memberships and Marketing for IEEE TEMS. So let's start the session. Redirecting to our speaker, Mr. Ravikiran Annaswamy. Over to you, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay, thanks. Good morning to all of you, and I still like that Andy is in the call, so thanks Andy for staying on late. Thanks Robert for the early morning session, and good morning or early afternoon to everybody in the call. I'm also very happy to see nearly 70 odd people. I just now saw 72 or 73 attendees in this webinar. Good to have all of you here, and also good to see that you are interested in learning a lot about technology and engineering management. And I think you got a fair idea of what we stand for as a society. In my session, I'm going to focus mostly on one technology and take you through from a market point of view. And the topic I've picked is where I work on for quite some time now. It's on electric mobility. The idea here is to give you some glimpses on what's happening in India, what's happening in general around electric mobility. And as a TEMS member, you also learn skills to analyze various technologies which come into every market, various technologies which are coming in newly, and also multiple ways to get these ideas to reality. In this session, I'm not going to talk very specifically on those skills, but it's an introduction on electric mobility. So when we recently discussed with many students, all of them have a different perspective on anything which happens around electric vehicles. When I mean electric mobility, it's the way electric vehicles are being deployed in the market. EV is the vehicle itself. So everybody has a different perspective. Some people looked at it from a vehicle point of view, some from electrical point of view, some from digital point of view. So it's not one picture, it's multiple aspects. I tried to cover various technologies, various topics which are going on around electric mobility. So when we say electric mobility or electric vehicle, the first thing which I'm quite sure all of you will recognize is a Tesla. Model S is just the image I've used, but it could be any of the Tesla models. Tesla is the most commonly known electric vehicle and everybody recognizes it instantaneously. Like when we photocopy now, we say Xerox. When we say EV, a lot of people think it is only Tesla. What we should remember is electric vehicle is in 1884 using lead acid, and it was the most popular means of mobility in the late 1800s, earlier late 19th century. It was the most common thing before Model T from Ford came up. electric vehicles were the most common part, whether it's in the US or in Europe. Electric vehicles were very common and they were using lead acid. Very interestingly, nearly 125 years later, we're still using lead acid batteries and we're still making vehicles in India and many countries where lead acid batteries are still used. So we shouldn't look at this technology of what's happening in electric vehicles to be something new. It's been there for a long time. It went out of fashion when the IC or the internal combustion engines became very popular with diesel and petrol, with Model T from Ford coming in 1920s. Post that, EVs went down because they were not seen as viable option because of one common problem, what we call as range anxiety. Where do I charge my vehicles? And very interestingly, again, it's the same problem we are talking even now. So we'll talk about this when we go forward. In India, if you have been following or if you're trying to find out where is an electric vehicle, the first thing which comes to your mind would be this, if you've seen it. This was the first, though it is not the first, but it was one of the most commercially viable option which came in. It was called REVA in 2001, Revolutionary Electric Vehicle Alternative, that is REVA. It later got bought by Mahindra. Now, later it was renamed as E2O. There is a newer iteration of this vehicle which is even now on the road. However, what we forget is that there are a million plus electric vehicles already in India. And if you are in North India, you would have for sure seen this vehicle, but we never recognize them as an electric vehicle. So this is called e-rickshaw. There are almost 1.5 million of lead acid based. Like I told you, even 125 years back, we were doing exactly the same vehicle. These vehicles are still used for last mile mobility, and they don't go beyond 30 kilometers per hour. If you have seen it, you should recognize these vehicles to be electric vehicles, lead acid based. Of course, it's not the cleanest of the vehicle in terms of technology. You can't call it a clean tech vehicle because the lead acid batteries do pollute. And there is a big roadmap to move these vehicles into lithium ion vehicles now. And you will see many, many more of these. Even last year, I think 100,000 of these vehicles were sold just in a few cities. So when we looked at India, so what's happening in the automobile industry, I tried to summarize with just one slide. There are a lot of things happening, and currently, with or without COVID, I think most of these things were going on. We start to use this word called ACES or case. The idea here is to say first is all the vehicles going forward are connected. So everything will be connected. In electric vehicle case, we are connecting the powertrain, we are connecting the battery, we are connecting the charging stations. All of them are getting connected. It's getting electric. Electric is only one form of clean mobility. Though electric is being pushed as the way of going forward, there are still hydrogen fuel cells coming in from Japanese vendors, which is being deployed in several markets. India is still evaluating it, and there are trials starting off on that. There are vehicles which are using ultra capacitors, very different technology from pure electric vehicles. So multiple methods have been tried, but electric is the most common at this moment in the market. Shared, I think India made shared mobility a huge topic in terms of how the urban transport works, whether it's last mile, just in time, rentals, leasing, all of that happened in India in a very, very big way. Now, if you ask me what's the impact of COVID, I know somebody asked the question in the previous talk by Robert. Shared mobility has had a huge impact now in India. If you have been using Bounce or Vogo or any of those shared mobility, all those businesses are facing a huge challenge at this moment. So because of social distancing and ability to maintain distance is making people to think, how would they use shared mobility? I think that is something for us to think as a market. This space is getting a little challenged and disrupted. Last being autonomous, something which we always say and laugh in India saying, would it ever work on Indian roads? Probably it's going to be a challenge to get it working on Indian roads. But if you remember, there are a lot of other kind of mobility in warehouses, in closed circuits, where autonomous vehicles is already being used and being tried. So case ACES is some word you need to remember because that is something which is happening in the automobile industry. Now, why electric vehicles? We picked up on the topic in the last slide. The most common topic which comes up with it's a clean mobility. It's a cleaner mobility, lesser pollution. But what we need to remember is the less pollution is at the point where the vehicle is being used. That is in the city, in the urban city, or wherever we use it. But is it really clean? Is it really carbon neutral? Is something which we all need to think and discuss because, for instance, in many countries, including India, 65% of our electricity is generated by burning coal. So if we need more electric vehicles, we are going to burn more coal, which means the pollution is not in the city, but the pollution now is increased at the point of generation, which will be more in the rural area and the industrial belts where the pollution increases. So this is a challenge which every country is going through. And India, interestingly, is moving a lot more towards solar, given our climate and given our geography. And I think that hopefully helps us to get out of this challenge. But for many more years, we will not be out of burning coal. So I think that's something we need to remember. But there are other benefits of being electric vehicle, not only being the only cleaner, because of the architecture of the vehicle, the way it is done with very simple electric motors and batteries, the amount of moving parts in the current automobile to compare to the EV, now EVs have 80% lesser moving parts. So how does it help? It helps to make it easy in manufacturing, extremely easy in maintaining, and also longevity of these vehicles are more because there are less number of moving parts in the vehicle. I think that is something for us to remember. At this point of time, the price of electricity is much cheaper compared to crude oil. Now, you can also ask me a question in the last months, the crude oil price went down and how will it impact EV? I think this is going to be a tussle, a fight in the next century, I would say, because EVs are not going to be a topic which will get over in 10 years. Countries have been planning up to 2050, 2060 in terms of transitioning. Even by 2040, only around 10% of the vehicle in the global market are expected to move towards electric vehicles. So there is going to be always a tussle in terms of oil price vis-a-vis electricity price. But if you currently see in Indian market, the electricity charge is so low that if you are using an equivalent electric vehicle to an IC engine comparison, if per kilometer the price is 4 rupees in diesel or a petrol engine, it comes down to less than a rupee in an EV. So that's where there is a lot of business sense for transport, logistics, urban mobility in terms of road transport organizations, last mile connectivity, all of them really like the electric vehicles because the cost of operating these vehicles are much lower because of maintenance. The fuel expenses are extremely low. And just as a point on cleaner alternative, as you all know, we have one of the most polluted cities in the world. During COVID, it was seen that Delhi's pollution level came so low that there is a big argument now to see we should use electric vehicles in most of the urban cities because the impact of reduced pollution is drastic. It is, we saw the exciting parts about EV, but why are they not being deployed so fast in every country? There are many challenges. One is what is called as range anxiety. Though right now, after many years, I've also come to a point that it really is not a challenge, but it's a common problem in everybody's mind because in a petrol or a diesel engine, if you're on the road, you know you will find a station or a pump to fuel your vehicle in a very short distance. You don't know where the chargers are. Where can I charge my vehicle if I run out of fuel? So in many cities, we did a study. Most of the vehicles are charged at home in the night, and the range they give you is between 100 kilometers to 300 kilometers based on the kind of vehicle, size of battery, all of that. And in India, if you are an urban commuter, you really don't do 100 kilometers unless in a Delhi region, you're going from Noida to Gurgaon and back again. In most cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, you really don't use more than 100 kilometers for an urban mobility. So range anxiety within a city is definitely not a big challenge. But of course, if you are planning to do an intercity travel is where the range anxiety becomes an issue. And government is trying to solve this by installing EV chargers all around the country at this point of time. The other challenge is most of the vehicles are take more time to charge. I will talk about it in the next slides. So availability of fast chargers, how fast can I charge, is something which is a challenge. The price of the vehicle, the battery forms 46% to 48% of the vehicle cost. At this moment, batteries cost a lot. The lithium-ion batteries is one of the chemistry. Multiple chemistries have been tried, but lithium-ion is the most common chemistry being used, and it is very expensive. And this is a challenge, and it's expected that the moment it comes down below $100 by 2025, the price of an electric vehicle and a regular vehicle will probably be the same, and then there is no brainer to switch towards electric vehicles. That's called the inflection point of electric vehicles. Time to switch. All of us have electric vehicles, so it takes more time for us to get rid of our current vehicles. So that's one of the reasons. Time limited choice of vehicles, not too many, but in India we are now starting to get many more models. I'll talk about that in the next slide. And not everybody has capability to manufacture batteries now. The cells are always done in 1 or 2 countries, so most countries are concerned about it. Again, it's just a concern right now, but I'm quite sure this gets resolved. And also the technologies are also rapidly changing. For instance, Robert is here on the call. Europe was using a CCS standard, which is the most common standard. Nissan, which is a Japanese company, uses a CHAdeMO standard. So suddenly now they released a car in Europe which uses CCS standard. So it's changing standards everywhere. India is using all the standards. And yeah, network support and maintenance networks are an issue. So given these challenges, there is still a lot of sale going on. In terms of percentage of sales, very interestingly, Norway or Scandinavian countries lead this space. Norway, Sweden, Finland, Netherlands. These are the places where we see a lot of electric vehicles being sold as a percentage of their overall vehicle. Also interesting is that Norway is very rich in oil, but it's one of the countries which is definitely invested by policy to say we will move towards electric vehicles. So most of the innovation is happening in this space. We should not forget China here, because that's extremely important from the other side of the graph, where you will notice that though Norway is by percentage, but surely by the number of vehicles being sold and the number of investment being done in electric vehicles, it's China which leads the world market in a huge way. If you notice here, in terms of number of vehicles sold, China tops way beyond every other country. Norway is still a smaller number in comparison to that. So I think that is something for us to remember. One is by how the government is pushing, and second is by the sheer number. And China has also led to a lot of innovations, not just in four-wheeler vehicles, but market very similar to India in terms of two-wheelers, three-wheelers, other category of vehicles. I think what China is doing is something what we would probably in India also adopt going forward. But on the car side, probably Scandinavia led, and California is the other area where I think there has been a lot of investment and a lot of interest in electric vehicles. Tesla leads the way from California. US, not all states of US are equally ready for electric vehicles. I think it's predominantly the West Coast, California based, where there's a huge technology advancement in terms of how electric vehicles do. In India, what does it mean? So what we always say here in India is it's going to be multimodal. India is such a large populous country. We can't depend on one kind of mobility. So I think multimodal is what is getting important. Most of logistics and last mile is getting electric now. There's a lot of interest there. And shared is what we believed in, but we'll see post-COVID how this gets transformed. Logic for India, why should we do that? We have the top polluted cities, like I already gave an example. I mean, during the lockdown period, we really noticed that the pollution levels came so low, and it made a strong sense, and government even used it in many discussions to say, there was always a topic to find out is transport is one of the reasons for pollution, or is it just the industrial pollution? Thanks to COVID, we could really remove the vehicles from the road now for months, 3 weeks to a month, and then the pollution levels dropped. So I think it is definitely one of the biggest polluters in many major cities. So I think that is getting a big push on government to make policies to move towards electric mobility. We are the top 3 oil importer in the world. We don't have our own oil field in a big way. So I think moving our reliance from oil into electricity would be a very good thing because we are power surplus in electricity. Contrary to what everybody thinks that India doesn't have electricity, that's not true. India is power surplus. We have 364 gigawatts, which is much more than what we actually consume. And in fact, we export power to Nepal and adjoining countries because as you know from electricity, once you generate, you can't store it. So we actually just distribute it to the neighboring countries and make some money out of it. So and the share of solar is increasing in a big way. And by 2025, it is supposed to cross 20%. So the idea is that the surplus power we get from solar would be used towards substituting for oil into electric mobility. And that's the long-term vision and strategy. So hopefully that works very well. And most of the transition into electric vehicle will happen with a lot of digital technologies. Unlike in the past, I think thanks to telecom revolution and Jio making 4G affordable for everybody in India across the country, I think everybody is now a digital native. They know how to use 4G networks, and probably we are one of the largest 4G networks in the world. So it's going to help transitioning into electric vehicles. But what we should remember is that though there is a lot of talk on electric vehicles in other countries, in Europe and in US, India and China are very similar. India is still a little more unique in the sense that our market is 80+% only two-wheelers, mopeds, bikes, and motorbikes and scooters. We make 80% of that, and three-wheeler is around 3. So it's almost like 83% of the market is very unique market, which is not same as what other countries have. So though we learn from other countries in terms of what is going on and what technologies, what we need to do is something very unique, and probably just one of few countries in Asia will do that. So there is a big push on saying how do we transform the two-wheeler market. And if you notice, most of the innovation happening now in India is around the two-wheel segment, and not so much on the cars. That's the reason you don't hear much around that space. So just wanted to just jump into a little bit into looking at the technology part of it. What does a car mean? What does the charger mean? What does the digital technology mean? So when I look at kinds of electric vehicle, you need to know these terms. A lot of different people use different terms. There is a hybrid electric vehicle, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and battery electric vehicle. These are just a terminology. What we need to remember in very simple terms is it's a way to transition from a regular vehicle to an purely electric vehicle. Hybrid is, there is a gasoline engine, everything is gasoline, but there is a small battery inside, but it still depends mostly on gas, and the battery gets charged using electric motor, and it's only used as a range extender to push a little bit, to give more other functionality in the car, and that's not the primary driver for getting the vehicle moving. Plug-in, but here again, this battery is not chargeable in hybrid because in hybrid, the battery charges using the motor. When you brake and when the car is driving, the battery charges and it is used back into the vehicle. Whereas in a plug-in hybrid, there is a bigger battery and the battery can be charged. And this definitely gives you a good amount of electric vehicle coming in. And Toyota Prius and all of them are the early generation of electric vehicles are these, where the battery takes over, but now gas gives you the range extension. So it's just flipped the other way around. So this is the most common, but what is happening in India and others are, we are not going this way. We leapfrog both these and went directly to this. We didn't do any of these two. Right now we are 100% electric, only battery with an electric motor, and that's how it runs. This is how the typical Tesla and other cars are. If you look at the car itself, car, two-wheeler, all of them architecture is the same. What we need to remember is it's a vehicle. There are a few things. If you look at an IC engine to a regular electric vehicle, first thing is, what is the fuel? The fuel is no longer oil. It's now energy, electricity. So you need to store it in the car. So typically you have a a battery, which is a lithium-ion battery, which is behind below your seat, below the car for better stability and structural stability of the car. Sometimes it is also kept in the rear trunk, front trunk, depends on the size of the car, the design of the vehicle. Usually it is below. In a two-wheeler, it is below your seat, the two batteries below your seat. Uh, these are very regular cells like AAA batteries, which come in lithium-ion batteries, but packaged in a way with a controller and a software which manages the voltage and the current. So one problem solved. We know it's an energy stored here. So how does it run? How does it work? Usually, it's a electric motor with a power control unit, which is what we need. So it's like an induction motor. It takes the electricity from the battery. There is a power control unit which converts the DC to AC and gives it to the induction motor. And as you know, if you have studied induction motors, they are the easiest of the motors which has been there in the market for nearly 100+ years. So all you need to do is change the amplitude and the frequency of the signal which goes in. You can accelerate, you can make it faster or go slower, and that is used for making the vehicle move. And usually the traction device is tied into the vehicle wheel or a unit like what you see in this picture. Both in the two-wheelers, the motor is actually in the wheel itself. It's inbuilt into the wheel, so that everything is done, and that's where everything else is controlled electronically by power control unit and the vehicle control unit. So the car becomes a lot more digital than mechanical. So it's all digitally controlled with signals and control. When you press your accelerator, it's actually electrical signals going on into an electronic device which decodes that and decides how much frequency should be changed, how much current should be changed, and then the vehicle starts to move. And when we are doing this, also what is interesting is that you should know that the motor can act more as a motor and also as a generator. So when you do a braking of the vehicle, it does the reverse work. It actually now becomes a generator when it is going in the stop. The vehicle is about to be stopped. That charges the battery. So that's what is called the regenerative charging. So it's a very simple philosophy. You give the current, it moves forward. When you're stopping, it actually acts other way around. It rotates other way around and charges the battery back. So I think that is a very powerful way electric vehicles use it. Of course, to ensure that this battery gets charged, you need to have a plug. So that's the plug. Some of them are quick or AC charge or DC charge. I'll talk about it in the next slide. So you need to have an onboard charger to charge the batteries. I think that's something which the car will have. So if you notice, other than that, it's just the body of the car. You don't need anything else. It's all the rest of them are all electronics which you need to add into the vehicle. Yeah. So in India, when you look at the same kind of vehicles now, the most advanced and the popular one is Ather. All the others are launching it. Greaves is the most popular in terms of numbers. Bajaj has launched it. TVS has launched it. There are many more startups launching the two-wheel vehicle because this segment is 85% of our segment, and we really need a lot of innovation to happen in this segment to get things running. On the three-wheel side, there is a lot of vehicles coming with different designs because again, this segment, we will have two categories of vehicles. One is called auto rickshaws and e-rickshaws. Auto rickshaws are what you are seeing, which can go beyond 50 kilometers per hour. E-rickshaws is the old vehicle I showed you. Though those cannot go beyond 30 kilometers per hour. I think there is going to be a speed limit between the two vehicles. On the cars, we did not have much option other than the e-Verito and the E2O. Now a very nice car has been launched, Nexon and Hyundai Kona, MG Hector, and Great Wall of China is the other model which is coming into the market. But you will pretty see a lot of Japanese vehicles in the market coming in. And all of these have a pretty higher price tag. Kona is almost twice as expensive as its IC engine variant. So it's a very premium car right now, but it gives you almost 350 kilometers per hour per charge. So it's a pretty long range. Nexon also gives you nearly 200 plus. So these vehicles are removing the range anxiety from people's mind. But what is important is they're slightly more expensive than the IC engine variants. Buses, all the road transports are moving in. We have Electra BYD, which is a Chinese bus, which is the most popular one right now on the road. Tata Motors is launched some of them. Ashok Leyland is launching it, and there are many more people who are launching as we are talking, JBM and others. These are a different form of vehicles. This is for two-wheelers for shared mobility in electric form. And these are for last mile Yulu bikes, and there are many of them like this. These are electric hybrid bikes, the bicycle kind of a form factor made electric, but with a lot more stability, which can be used in the last mile. So in Bangalore, Ahmedabad, Mumbai, a lot of cities you will find the Yulu bikes. Of course, these are evolving. This is the first generation. There are nearly 10,000 of them now in multiple cities. That's just to give you some idea on the vehicle. Now, these vehicles have to be charged. So how does it work? I talked about it very briefly. You know there is a battery in the vehicle. So now there are two ways of charging these batteries, and that is a huge technology by itself. And this is where the grid and the electrical industry people come in, no longer the automobile guys. The other part was automobile. Here it is more about electrical industry. If the vehicle has a charger on board, which can convert, which is nothing but an inverter which converts AC to DC, then it is called an AC charger. Because on the outside, you just need to ensure that you're giving the AC power, but the vehicle itself has an onboard charger which converts the AC into DC and charges the battery. This is called the slow charging because the vehicle will not have a big inverter, so the electrical equipment will be small. So it's like a mobile battery or a phone battery, laptop battery charging. It takes more time to charge. The fast charging doesn't happen here. It takes in several hours to 8 hours to charge a car. So, but at home charging, this is the best. When the vehicle is parked for a longer time, this is the best because the equipment itself is very cheap. On the other side, you want to have fast chargers like Tesla chargers or DC fast chargers, 150 kilowatt, 250 kilowatt chargers. Now for buses, we are going up to 1 megawatt chargers. They can charge the battery very fast. Then the car or the vehicle does not have anything. It just has a socket. All the electrical equipment is moved into the bigger charger called the DC fast charger. They have all the inverters, all the heavy electrical equipment, and they can charge the car at a very high rate. Like I said, it can go up to 1 megawatt, which is massive. But in India, we are starting at 15 kilowatt up to 150 kilowatt. That's what we are doing because our grid has its own challenges to give a huge capacity for each charge. And when we are doing that, the other thing we need to remember is the battery itself has limitation. The vehicle has to have best-in-class battery and the BMS to be able to get this high capacity current to flow into the battery. So though the bulk chargers can do a fast charging, the big chargers can do fast charging, it also is dependent on the battery and the BMS, something we should remember. These are the kind of chargers. These are two-wheeler chargers, very tiny laptop kind of chargers, to AC chargers, which are wall mounted, and to very high voltage DC chargers. You will have multiple kinds of them. In India, we are also trying what is called as battery swap station, where instead of charging your vehicle, you keep a ready charged battery, and when the vehicle comes, you just swap the battery, like we did with the LPG cylinders and the gas cylinders, which was used in cars. So I think CNG kits, which was used, we are now trying to do a battery swap. The challenge here from a technology point of view, when you are a technology manager, what you need to do is to really figure out where do I bet, what technology do I go behind. The connectors itself are a huge challenge because there are multiple type of connectors to give the electricity to the car. Each country is following a different one, and AC, DC, all of them differ in terms of the plug socket format. The three common ones are GB, which is a Chinese standard, CCS type 1 and type 2, which is Europe standard, CHAdeMO, which is a Japanese standard, and US use CCS 1 and now CCS 2, and Tesla has its own standard for charging. Now, also interesting thing which is going on is GB and CHAdeMO are coming together, and there is a new standard called CHAoG. CHAoG is the next standard coming up, which is supposed to merge CHAdeMO and GBT, but that's again probably several years from now. India has to make a choice of this. We try to make our own connector based on ISO standards, but I think for two-wheelers it is being done, but not for cars. Currently, we support GB standard for certain segment of cars, the lower voltage cars, CCS and CHAdeMO for all kinds of charge. But that brings a big challenge on the chargers because now you need guns like this, not one kind of gun, multiple kinds of guns in your thing. If you notice, this charger has all the three types. It increases the cost of the charger and it makes it difficult for people to deploy. So I think this is a challenge which every technology manager has in terms of where do I bet, which standard do I go behind. Okay, so so much on technology, but where do you see these chargers? The smaller ones, AC chargers, you will see at home and work. At parking, you will start seeing faster chargers, public places, highways, for logistics and others, transport hubs. And there is also a concept saying the charge can come to you wherever you are. Some of the companies in California are doing it, also starting in India. That is, if you have parked your vehicle, the battery comes to you with a charge and they will plug in and charge your vehicle. Not the most economical in markets like India, and that's where we are looking at the battery swappable for platform. A lot more things will happen for autonomous cars. There is a method to see how it could be charged. Ultra capacitor chargers are coming up, pantograph based chargers where the bus can stand there and the capacitor can be charged with extremely high voltage directly from the pantograph and it can go for a short distance. Wireless charging is being tried in Nagpur now, where when you're driving on the road has a conductive layer which will charge your vehicle. And lamppost, India has a lot of electrical poles. We're looking at how to make these lampposts useful with the solar equipment on top to charge bikes and two-wheelers. And vehicle roof, the car itself will become solar as we go forward, but that's taking some time. Yeah, so that was on the automobile and that was on electrical. Then there is something on digital. There's a lot of IoT sensors and a lot of IoT equipment into the vehicle, and all of them have telematics inbuilt into it. So I think this is a segment which is growing extremely fast because you need to standardize it and get this in place. So India is getting all the vehicles connected as we go forward. On the technology and electronic side, BMS is one of the key elements in electric vehicle. So if you're a student, this is an area to research and work on because in future, this is the topic which will make a huge difference in terms of how the vehicles manage their energy. So I think this is a lot to do with software and electronics. For the chargers, you have cloud-based systems which come in and try to manage all of that. So I think this is something you will see in, it's called the central management system. So all the chargers are controlled from the cloud. Coming towards end, so I've given you very quick update on all the three. Looking at what is the future, what are we looking at? So there are multiple success factors for this kind of vehicle to work in anywhere in the world, particularly in India. Like I said, connectors is the first topic to figure out because unless you get this right, your investment in infrastructure will go for a toss. So I think AC, DC or kind of connector is an extremely important topic. The grid itself has to get ready. Though I said India is power surplus, we have challenges at the last mile in terms of the substations and the nano stations which are there. Can they manage 150 kilowatt chargers? Currently, not all of them can. So those have to be upgraded at the last mile of the grid to get these electric vehicles working. It's a huge opportunity for auto and telecom companies because all the vehicles are connected. All the components are sending data to the cloud from the vehicle to the battery to the charger, all of them. So I think they see a huge opportunity in automotive transforming itself into electric. Battery, both battery cell makers and the battery pack makers, there is a huge opportunity for them. Right now, India is only a battery backpacker and a BMS and integrator. Cells are imported from other many different countries. So I think that will be a lot of reliance on another country. Unlike now, oil we depend on certain set of countries. For batteries, we will depend on certain set of countries. So I think there is a lot of work going on to see what alternate chemistry is there something indigenously can be built. Every country is thinking about it. Also, India is thinking about it. But at this moment, any player in this space, there is a huge opportunity. And because the vehicle itself will now change, you don't need all the traditional auto ancillaries who build all the auto components. Now you need a very different kind of players, starting from IoT devices to controllers and motors, which are very different from what the standard auto components were. So there are new players coming in this space. I think that's also very important for us to know that there is a huge opportunity in that space. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to summarize from electric vehicles. I will take questions after that. So I've just tried to give you a glimpse on three different aspects: the automobile side, the grid side, and the digital side. Before I conclude, I just want to wear my hat of Vice President of TEMS memberships. Please visit our site. There is a lot of action happening. We are doing a lot of activities, including this activity. Um, Globally, I think we are one of the very active societies in terms of getting all our members with multiple value, whether it's the webinars we run, whether it's the content we offer, the publications we have, the conferences we run, the industry forums we do. And like Andy already mentioned, India has been special in terms of what we have done in the last 1 year. So thanks to all the volunteers. I know many of you are student ambassadors who have contributed to this success. Also request, I think there are 70 odd of you here. I want each one of you to be a TEMS member. Do join us and let's do a lot of things in the next 1 year. Our goal here is to make you a leader. We want you to be a leader. It doesn't matter whether you're a student or a young professional, your leadership skills can start at a very young age. And TEMS will give you sufficient opportunity to learn, to practice, and also get to meet a lot of senior people around the globe. And as you see, there are people across the world coming in and contributing to every activity we are doing. So I think that's a community feeling, that's a strong bond we have. Would love to see all the 70 of you who have attended this session to become members. Please do join immediately, and then would love to have you as part of your community. Yeah, I think that's it from my side. Thank you. And I believe the future will be electrifying. So would love to see all of you joining in, and together we can do a lot more things. Thank you. Thanks to the team for this opportunity, and we will share and discuss whatever needs to be done. Questions, please. I can take the questions now.
Thank you so much, sir. And surely from your speech, like audience will be encouraged to join IEEE TEMS. So we have two questions from the Ibrahim. What infrastructures and the resources are required to support mass adoption of EV in a nation like India?
Yeah, Ibrahim, so I think I mentioned it briefly if you noticed. One is it's a chicken and egg story. Will the vehicles come first or the infrastructure? To get people to not have a fear of where do I charge my vehicle? So infrastructure is extremely important. But unless you get a lot of vehicles, there is no business case for infrastructure. So that's the reason at this moment, government is investing in bringing in the infrastructure part on from the grid side. Most of the distribution companies are investing in chargers, charging equipment around the country. We are now installing around 3,500 in the next 1 year, and followed by a lot more private players installing it. So I think that's the first step which you will see. And once that infrastructure is in place by next year, you will see at least many Japanese automakers bringing in their cars. So we will have probably a dozen plus electric vehicles next year, and that should start the car part of it. And two-wheeler, we already have many models, and that will sort of disrupt the current two-wheeler market on the regular, the Hero or the TVS or Bajaj. You will see all of them move to electric, and that would be a big change. So Divya, back to you.
Much, sir. So what are the major implications for EV for multiple industries, countries, and society at large?
Yeah, so like I said, it is going to be an impact on three different industries: auto industry, electrical industry, and digital industry. So it's the same around the world. On the auto side, the traditional automakers might get very disrupted in this change. There may be a lot of new players who will emerge, a lot of startups, a lot of companies who will probably move towards making the vehicles, who never thought about it in the traditional sense, because the IC engine vehicles are so complicated with so many components. You need to have a proper supply chain. Your logistics have to be in shape for you to get the whole thing working. But in an electric vehicle, anybody can do it with a bit of investment. So you may find a lot of new players emerging in the auto side, and a lot of auto ancillaries will go maybe out of business or transform into making components for electric vehicles. But of course, don't take it too drastically. Like I mentioned, the complete electrification is probably 50 years from now. So the regular industry will still remain, but there will be some disruption in this auto side. And the form factor of vehicles will change. Autonomous vehicles may even make a very different looking form factor of vehicles, which right now we don't have. It may not look like a traditional car or a bike. On this second side, on the grid side, all countries will now look at how to strengthen their electric grid, because it's not just industries and people using electricity, the vehicles will start using electricity. I think that will now impact the way the final set of infrastructure will be built in all the markets. And for that, I foresee a lot of investment, a lot of new players coming in. And electricity distribution is no longer centralized. All governments are making it privatized, particularly Europe and India. Anybody can now do it. In India, you can install a charger in front of your home. There is no challenge now. Government gives you permission to do that. But there are some tariff limitations, but you can do that. So which will mean we will see a huge infrastructure building which will happen in a very different way, like an STD box which happened in telecom revolution. Suddenly, for a few years, you may see chargers everywhere till the market settles down. So I think that's another space where we will see a lot of disruption. Third is on the digital. Like I said, it's a big advantage for a country like India with software powerhouse and design powerhouse. So there is a lot of work which will happen across all kinds of vehicles, and everything will be connected. So telecom infrastructure gets importance, because these are very critical equipment, because when the vehicle is moving and the data is being sent, you better have everything done in the right way, which will also push for the 5G rollout to happen faster. I remember Robert talking about 5G rollout in Netherlands already. India has now slowed down the 5G rollout, waiting for another 2 years. But EV can push, or the connected vehicles may have a push towards getting the 5G networks in the country. So overall, I see it as a positive thing. It's not going to make any major losses for anybody, but the whole auto industry will transform itself along with the grid and the digital industry. Divya, back to you.
Thank you so much, sir. We have two more questions, but we will, due to the time constraint, we will take it offline. Thank you so much, sir.
Hey, thanks all of you. Would love to see, again, I repeat, would love to see all of you joining in TEMS. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So, as per the time constraint is there, we will be having the quiz at last. And now we will further proceed with our third session. The third session topic is making a difference with drones, which is going to be conducted by Dr. Ruchi Saxena. Dr. Ruchi Saxena is the founder and the director of Kero Robotics, a social impact consultancy firm. She is also coordinating India Flying Labs, dedicated to the use of the drones, drone-based data, robotics, and other remote sensing technologies for healthcare, disasters, development, agriculture, conservation, and education. She is a doctor by the primary education and works on a high impact healthcare and a disaster risk reduction projects. Now, without taking much of your time, I would like to redirect to Dr. Ruchi. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, you are not audible. You are muted.
So, hello everyone. I am Dr. Ruchi Saxena, as I was just introduced, and I was just introduced. I am a doctor by profession. So, you would all be wondering what's a doctor doing in an Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering Association. But yeah, I'm here, and I'm absolutely glad to be invited to this forum, because there are a lot of things that I would like to share with you about my journey, my experiences, my story, and what am I doing. We already had heard from the other speakers about how challenging the entrepreneurship and make it more meaningful. So my evolution has been a curiosity-driven evolution. I graduated as a doctor and I started working in clinics earlier. But the curiosity of trying to understand how systems work for corporates, or when you have lots of patients to be treated, how did that happen? And that curiosity took me into another corporate healthcare sector where I started working as an employee. And again, the curiosity took me into learning more about the management there and about technology. I was in charge of developing clinical management systems and monitoring the healthcare quality and treatment outcomes. And I was working in very close connections with the software industry. And again, the curiosity took me into understanding that no matter how much you do about the quality, there is something else that's in the core, and that's the process excellence. So I learned about process excellence, Lean Six Sigma. I started auditing as a Lean Six Sigma auditor, as well as a quality auditor with the British Standards Institution. And that's how I started working with different healthcare organizations, started training them into systems and processes and disaster risk reduction. One of those places that I had been to as a consultant for disaster risk reduction, that's where it changed my life. And I realized that just working as an external consultant doesn't work. You really need to get into the depth of everything to really start making a change. And that's where my entrepreneurship journey began. This is the place. Now, this place is in the far west of Nepal. I visited there to build systems for the pre-hospital medicine. And this is what I had witnessed. So what do you think this would be? Any idea? You see 4 people and a stretcher, and you see somebody covered with a blanket. Now, is that a dead body? Is that a living human being? Surprisingly, this is a living human being, and I inquired. So they had walked for 5 hours, trekked down the mountain to reach this particular health center that I was auditing. Now, this I realized is a fact for many of the places in Nepal. And also I realized that the challenge to reach the nearest healthcare center is not just for India or Nepal, it's for most of the countries in the world. I was born and brought up in Mumbai, so I was pretty fortunate to have the medical stores and the nursing homes and the clinics and hospitals just at a stone's throw. But that is not the fact for most of the populations of the world, and that's kind of motivated me or propelled me into working on technology solutions. I was already on the board of a remote healthcare monitoring company, and the biggest challenge that we faced over there was no matter how great systems you make in the remote healthcare monitoring system, delivering the medicines was still a challenge. For example, Jaisalmer. So a patient from Jaisalmer would contact the doctor in Jaipur. All the diagnosis happens online, the examination happens, blood tests are taken, everything is done online. But when you have to deliver the medicine, how do you do that? Because ultimately, the local medical store in that place would still not be stocked with the medicines. Then again, the drones was the answer. Now, let me tell you, when I passed out my 12th standard, I did receive an admission in electrical engineering, but the only engineering I was interested in was aeronautical engineering. And the reason was I wanted to make flying cars. If it's aeronautical, yes, otherwise no other engineering. But you see how destiny works, it brings back to you the question that you had left behind in your life. And that's when I started working on drones. Now, initially when I started working on drones, all I needed was one drone, one manufacturer, so that I could go to these health centers or to the municipalities or to the district magistrate or somebody to show them that this is what we can do. This is what drones can do. And according to my understanding, the average distance, or most of the places which had been, especially even in India, places like Nandurbar or in Himachal or wherever, you have this average distance of at least 50 kilometers, 50 to 90 kilometers. Nandurbar, I remember the nearest blood bank was at 92 kilometers. If you don't have a drone which covers that distance, it just doesn't make sense. So I was taken around a ride. So somebody met me and showed me a drone and said that this can travel for 5 kilometers. I'm like, boss, this won't work for my use case. I need at least 35 kilometers. So this is how the journey started, and not this manufacturer, not that manufacturer. Somebody would definitely make it for me, and somebody would be ready to pay for that. And so figuring out these questions, I realized this is not the problem of a drone. This is the problem of an entire ecosystem. And now when you imagine that, let's say you have drone ports in every district. Let's say you're working with 100 districts. And let's say you need at least 5 people to be working on each district. You need minimum 500 people to be actively working with drones who know everything about drone not manufacturing, but maintenance and electronics and and launch and tracking and tracing. I'm like, oh my God, now where do I get 500 people from? Again, I realized that this is not just about the drones. Even if somebody is able to give me the right kind of drone, I would still have other things to figure out. So unless I have everything figured out, I cannot really send a proposal to anybody. That's where my organization Carobotics started. And I'm like, this has to be done in an organizational manner. And Carobotics has 3 words in it: care, aerial, and robotics. It's very difficult to pronounce by somebody, but I really believe in this name, so I'm not changing it easily. And somewhere along my journey, I came across Flying Labs. Now, Flying Labs is an organization that I've been tracking even before they were Flying Labs. They were called Humanitarian UAV Network. And I got in touch with them through a common reason that I was trying to look for solutions for the flood which had happened in Kerala. And they were looking also for somebody who could do that in Kerala. And this is how we connected. And then we started India Flying Labs. Now, Flying Labs is all across the world in 30 countries. I take care of the India Flying Labs. And over the last 2 years, this is, before I go on to our network, let me just show you this so that you understand what Flying Labs is and what exactly we do. Is the YouTube visible? Audible?
No, ma'am, it's not audible.
It's not audible. Do you know how can I make it audible?
You can share your screen, probably.
Okay. So if I share my full screen, right?
Yeah.
Now?
Yes, working.
Now, can you see my PowerPoint again? Is my PowerPoint visible? Yes, thank you. So you see, that is the power of local. And when you belong to a community like this, you no longer feel lonely. You feel connected with a common cause, with a lot of other people, a lot of other professionals all around the world. And now within India itself, we are able to grow India Flying Labs into an open collaborative network of professionals and organizations who are coming together to solve social problems using drones and drone-based data, remote sensing and even robotics, but then main is the drones and drone-based data. These are most of the manufacturers, service providers, NGO partners, academics within India who are supporting our cause. Across the world, as I told you, we are almost 30 flying labs now, and these are mostly localized to the global south. And the idea is to shift power from the global north to the global south and make the technology more accessible to the people who need them the most. Now, the main areas that we work on are healthcare, disasters, conservation, agriculture, youth engagement, and sustainable development. And this is how the Flying Labs frameworks generally looks like. We really believe in building the local skills by providing hands-on training, increasing the local impact by doing projects for social good, catalyzing the local businesses through business incubation programs, and supporting the local innovators. And this is how we facilitate the development of local ecosystem. We even work with the local governments to support them in the policy making, wherever the policies are not there for the drones at all. And we bring drone education to various countries, where again, the drone education is not available, licensing and the professional programs, advanced programs as well. So what I have done in the last 2 years, each of the projects that you see in front of your screen, the Project Aerodrome, UAV Rapid Response Task Force, Project Wings, and Drones for Daughters, each of it was born out of a reason. Project Aerodrome, obviously, as I told you, where you realize that it's an ecosystem problem, where you have to develop a lot of skills to work on each of the drone posts that you're talking about for healthcare. You need to work and train a lot of local drone pilots and drone engineers. Now, why I mean local is because most of our engineering, or let's say your engineering hubs, are focused in Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, probably Gurgaon. But this is not where you really require technology. Technology is required a little away from these cities, maybe 100 kilometers, 200 kilometers from these cities. And not many people want to work there. That's going to be a problem. Where you want the technology, you need to have people from those places to be trained and empowered to do that. For example, tomorrow, if I want to have a drone, let's say in Himachal, people from Himachal, the youngsters from Himachal, should be trained into drone pilot flying, as well as, drone flying, as well as drone maintenance. This is extremely important. Project Aerodrome is solving that problem. UAV Rapid Response Task Force was again born out of a similar situation. We were in Odisha, and we were trying to respond to the cyclone there. And you just saw what's power of local. But in India, local is not enough. You need to be hyper local, because even in Odisha, I was an outsider. We needed things from Odisha who can understand the local language, the local culture, knew the local places very well. Take the lead, not me, not any of us coming from either Delhi, Bangalore, Chandigarh, or Mumbai. No, none of us. We need people from Bhubaneswar, Puri, or different places in Odisha to take the lead. Similarly, every vulnerable area within the country, we need to empower the local teams to do the same thing. So we teach them about drones, we teach them about data, the drone-based data. We teach them about analysis of this data and how to make meaningful reports out of it. We teach them about ethics, safety, and responsibility of drone flying. And we also teach them about team building, communication, and coordination with the local authorities. Project Wings was born because when you realize that, okay, fine, we will learn everything, but what about the generation which is about to come? You just saw from everybody's discussion, you're talking about artificial intelligence, and we're talking about IoT, electrical vehicles, but the kids tomorrow would be really learning this and leading this from front. How do we prepare these children tomorrow? And that is happening in Project Wings. And the idea is to make drone education as easily available as the computer education we had in 1990s, and to bring it to various schools. Now, Drones for Daughters was born because whenever I was going in different conferences, I was probably alone over there. You had suited men, and the only girl on the panel was just me. I didn't like this equation, and I wanted to change this equation. And that's where the Drones for Daughters was born, to have more women leaders in the drone industry who can do it in their style, in their unique style. I'm not saying that men are wrong or bad, but I'm just saying that women representation is equally important, because women are different, and when they come in, they bring in their own personal qualities into the project. So this is the range of things that we do with drones: training, projects, we organize various working groups, and we conduct events like webinars, seminars, conferences. Let's talk about the main topic today, making a difference with drones. Now, how to apply drones for social impact. Number one, do no harm. Safety first. This is extremely important. I'll just quickly go through this list before I show you the real life examples. Stay legal. Wherever you are, in whichever country you work with drones, it's important to know about the local laws and comply with them. Don't try to go against the laws. I remember one of the professors had told us once, he was not a professor actually, the regional director of Airports Authority of India, who said that fly as high as you want, but always remember the law will always be above you. So always respect the local laws wherever you are and follow them. Stay relevant. Relevance is very important. Don't fly drones if they're not really required. If the same project can be done using, let's say, satellite data, do it. If the same thing can be done much better by door-to-door collection of data, do it. If the same thing can be done better by still images taken from your camera, do it. Drone images only if it's extremely relevant and important. Why? Because I don't know how much you guys know about drones, but drones collect extremely sensitive and high resolution data. And this data could be as accurate as 1 centimeter. So we don't want to reveal a lot of the personal identification information in this particular thing. So we want to restrict drones to only relevant areas. Even when you do that, stay extremely ethical, because the communities that you're working for do not really know these technologies, and you would come in like superheroes there with your drones and try to take the pictures of their houses, and they may not understand everything, but it's your duty to explain them that these drones are collecting these images and this is how these images will be used. Get a consent before you do that, and always remember to ethically use the data that you collect, destroy it after a certain time, and ensure that it is used only for the purpose that it was collected, and it is not misused for any other reason. And always collaborate. This is what I have done in my journey. I could not have done so much without collaboration with all the partners. It's not possible for anybody on any particular team to do everything which is required in a vast industry like drones or disasters or conservation. You need to collaborate with different experts, and you should be open to do that. Localize a response. As I said, what we learned in Odisha is always looking for the local experts. If there are no local experts, create local experts, create the local power circle there, and ensure that you are passing on the information back to them, giving them the relevant training so that they don't need you as often. Now, for some startups, it could be a matter of existence or survival, but trust me, you will be much more respected if you do this. And when you are creating technologies, a few things that you should remember is whatever technology you create, manufacture drones, manufacture electrical vehicles, electrical tractors, or whatever you're trying to do, or even the local battery packs that you're talking about, make it affordable, accessible, make it available to these communities that really need them. What's the point of having the drones available in Switzerland but not in Mohali? You need it there. When you need it there, you need it there. You have to make it available. How to make it available? That's the supply chain issue that you need to solve as an entrepreneur. Ensure that your technologies are easy to learn. As you must have seen in the picture where I was with the children, now these children are from a tribal village near Mumbai. Now they have to learn your technology, and they may not really be extremely trained in English or in technology itself. So if your drone or your application or your controller or your app on your phone is as simple as a Facebook or a WhatsApp, it can be done by anybody, then that's the technology you should be going for. And make it really simple. In the back end, it could be extremely robust and intelligent, but in the front end, it has to be simple. It has to be extremely easy to deploy. It shouldn't take 3 suitcases for you to carry your technology to the place where you need to deploy it. It has to be as tiny as possible, as lightweight as possible, as easy to just plug in and play as possible. Because when we go and work in disasters and humanitarian situations, we really cannot carry the load with us. Please realize that. We need to have it portable, lightweight, very simple. It shouldn't have too many tags, like a huge antenna carrying along, or like a big vehicle as a generator to be following you. That's not possible. Try to make your technology extremely easy to deploy. Make it locally manageable. This is very, very important, because you cannot always keep exporting your technology just to get it repaired. If you break a wing, if you lose a part, you cannot keep waiting for those couriers to keep coming in and out. No, you can't do that. You need to make your spare parts locally available. And I'm very glad to share with you that a couple of startups that we are mentoring, we are asking them to focus on these local spare parts availability. Why? Because this will help India to become more self-reliant and resilient in the future, and we become less dependent upon the exports from any other country. And I really believe that this is kind of knowledge pool that we have, and you can see it even in this panel. We can really make it in India, and what our Prime Minister says is absolutely true. We should make it in India as much as possible. And as far as the quality concerned, we should learn quality from Europeans, from Japanese, and try to bring in that quality in our products, that they do have the respect internationally as well. Locally maintained, as I told you, the same thing. Now for the drones, we have a vision. Just the way you have the local repair shops for motorcycles or for bicycles, you need to have local repair shops for drones as well. Just the way you have local repair shops for mobile phones and for televisions and for washing machines, you need to have local repair shops for drones as well. Till that happens, we really need to start developing the ecosystem for that as well. And as engineers or as future manufacturers or future innovators, it has a responsibility to really do that, and locally owned. Now, many times we see, especially in drone industry, we have foreign drone companies coming in. They come in with their drones, they do a particular project, and they go away. They don't leave anything behind them. When you need them again, they will again become extremely pricey and come down and act too smart and try to do a particular project. But this is not sustainable. To make any technology sustainable, you have to have local ownership. So figure out how can you make the local partners into your project who can own this technology and use it and scale it to solve their local problems. That's extremely important to think about. Now, once we have these ecosystem questions figured out in our minds, let's look at the real life case studies from various partners that we have within India, across the world, and some of which even we have done. So the major application of drones that we see these days is changing. Now, the old farmers are all retiring, and we don't have the youth coming and taking over these farms from their parents. This gap is going to create a huge problem. Robots, drones are an extremely interesting way of luring the youth back into their farms. And to, if they don't want to make their hands dirty, don't worry, you always have farm robotics who can do that. Digital land boundaries. Now this has two important implications, especially in India. This is an image from Africa where this thing was done, and drones and drone-based data can be extremely useful in marking the digital land boundaries. And what we have learned from them is that drones can give you certain amount of this data, which you can you get very high grade, high resolution images or maps. Now, what we need to do is go back to the communities, go from door to door and ask them to mark it out for you, because they know their farm boundaries much better than us. Now, for example, you will even see in this particular screen in this farm, you have this kind of a land which is green as well as brown. So drone can help you take the picture, but marking these boundaries, it has to be the local farmers and the local farmer communities to tell you that this land belongs to me. Even though it appears different on the drone image, it has to be coming in from the communities to tell you where to mark the boundaries. And this digital data is extremely important in crop insurance, especially after disasters, when the claim has to be made by these farmers and they have to be compensated for their losses. And also for just land ownership, the rights and the ownership. So this becomes a kind of your passport or your ration card, a digital ration card for your land, a land proof. Crop health analysis. Now, precision agriculture is going to be on a forefront. And what I mean by that is, when you look at an image like this, you can figure out where are the strained crops and where are the healthy crops. And this can help in targeting only these specific crops for disinfection or for pesticides. So this avoids the misuse or abuse of pesticides or overuse of the pesticides, and prevents additional harm to either the crops or the farmers. Precise pesticide and insecticide spraying, this again complements the previous slide. Is once you have figured out, like if you have large land, and once you figure out this is the part of the crop that needs insecticide, and there are algorithms which can calculate the exact amount of pesticide that you require and exact type of pesticide that you require. According to that, you can have these spraying drones come and do the work for you. A lot of GIS experts are using irrigation and drainage models to plan the drainage systems along large fields, especially in countries like Europe where you have large farms. Pest monitoring. The drones with infrared camera or the night vision camera have been extremely useful in keeping an eye on the farm, especially at night, where you have the pests coming in. If it could be animals, it could be rodents, it could be anybody. So that's one way of monitoring the pest using drones. Evidence building for insurance claims. When you have a before picture, before the disaster, and when you have an after picture, that match could tell you that exact damage which has happened because of disasters like cyclones, storms, floods. So having this data with the government is extremely important. And I'm very happy to share with you, government of our country is launching something called Swamitva Yojana, wherein pan-India, the drones will be flown in all the villages, wherein just to give you the digital land data of every land boundary that you have over there. And this is, again, the aim is to have these things possible. Study of invasive species. I was not working alongside, just having a conversation with a botanist. And invasive species is becoming an increasing concern with the botanists, is because when you have an invasive species coming into a territory, it really takes over the biodiversity of the entire place. And drones can really help you figure out these invasive species, because once you have figured out what the species looks like or what the plant looks like, that data could be fed into an AI system. And with that machine learning, you can actually map out all the invasive species in this particular area. And this really helps the researchers not just understand what's happening, but even formulate strategies to avoid or to solve this problem. Study of forest cover monitoring and illegal logging, and this, especially in South America, our partners in Peru are doing it for Amazon rainforest. And they are able to monitor the forest and even monitor the illegal logging which is happening over there. Not just illegal logging, illegal mining, illegal sand mining, all of these are extremely easily monitored using drones and satellites as well. Wildlife monitoring. The best application is one when you have this kind of a raw data where you can see these wildlife in your drone images. A nicer way of doing that is tracking these wildlife using the RF tags on their ears or on their bodies. So you have an RF tag on the animals, and then you have an RF sensor on the drone. So together it creates an algorithm and shows you where exactly your animals are distributed in the entire forest. Human-animal conflict, especially in our northeast areas, even in Nepal. So drones are being used to avoid the human-animal conflict, and they inform the humans that there is an animal around, and they also create a kind of annoyance for the animals so that they avoid coming into the human territory. This has been experimented with to some extent, and so far it's been well received. Study of aquatic plant species. A lot of underwater drones are also used, as well as the aerial drones, in studying the aquatic plant species. We have our friends in Australia who use it for coral reef monitoring, and those case studies are available on our webinars as well. Sharks and whales. Again, aerial drones are used to track the sharks and whales, especially along the Australian shores. They have kind of created an alarm system there, wherein the drones are on a ship and they are keeping an eye on the sharks and the whales in that area. And they send an alarm back to the coast, wherein if there are swimmers, then they know about it and they keep away from the shores. Underwater drones are again used for monitoring the biodiversity within the sea, and these have been extremely useful. Now, this is a robotic boat which is made in India by a team called Sagar Defense Engineering. And this is made by Sagar Defense Engineering, and this robotic boats are used to keep the water clean. And this project was actually during the Kumbh Mela, wherein they were keeping the Ganga clean and clean the water from all the flowers and the petals and the leaves. And this boat can carry about 3 kilograms of filth and bring it back to the shore, and then you can empty the entire basket and send it back again. Glacial lake monitoring. These are our partners in Nepal who are doing the glacial lake monitoring and monitoring the lakes for any cracks to avoid any kind of flash floods. But solar farms, now we know that India is targeting a lot of solar farms in India. So drones with infrared ability are able to monitor these solar panels for any kind of cracks or damages. And the reason why they do that is because the cost of maintenance can be extremely high. And a crack in time saves 9 is the philosophy that they use. And it's important to keep track of every crack which develops so that you can repair it early, because the damages can be expensive if they really increase. Similarly, windmills. Now, windmills are really high. Have a look at tiny malfunctions along the edges. It's extremely difficult. The drones are very useful in doing that. Similarly, we are a lot of our partners are using drones for monitoring of telecommunication towers, and they're also using it for bridge monitoring or for the railway, the cables that you have along the railway line or even the railway tracks. So this has been used in India to a large extent, and this has been really promising. Now, vaccine distribution. I have a small video here which I can show you. And this is in Vanuatu. This is a project done by UNICEF. And UNICEF is actually doing it in various countries. They're doing it as pilots initially, but then they go on to do it as large-scale projects. And drones have been extremely helpful in reducing the accessibility divide for vaccines. So the challenge with vaccines in these countries is that you need to have vaccines delivered on a particular schedule. But what happens is sometimes the roads are so bad that you can't even get there on foot. So generally what these people do is they carry the vaccines on their motorcycles or on the backpacks or even the horses or even donkeys. But when you can make their life much easier by having drones, and that's the aim of the whole project. Similarly, Brandon Products. Now, this is one of the most famous companies in drone cargo delivery, and that's called Zipline. And they're doing it in 2 countries in Africa now. And they paradrop their products in this box, and that's where the healthcare workers collect them. So these drones are fixing drones, and they don't land at the delivery site. They just paradrop it, and then they return. So the benefit is that the drone can be extremely quick in doing that and return very quickly as well, because if it lands and it takes off, it takes a lot of time. And also you need to train the people at the receiving end to launch these drones back to you. So when you don't have that kind of thing, you can avoid training more people, and you can just maintain one facility in the center. Now, this is what we had done in Amazon rainforest again with the team in Peru. And this was a drone which was not a really fancy drone. This was a locally made drone joined by duct tapes and by thermocol pieces. But this actually did the work of covering the distance of which would have otherwise taken 6 hours in a boat in just 30 minutes. So this was extremely useful, and they were trying to demonstrate how snake antivenoms can be delivered and even other medical emergency drugs. What we learned from this project was that the technology need not be fancy, it should just work. Similarly, in Europe, this technology is being tried out for atrial, it's called an atrial emergency defibrillator, AED machines. And these machines, so the drone is designed in such a way that it has the machine inside it. And they are experimenting how useful it can be for saving lives in various places. Organ transplant was again experimented with in North Carolina in US, and it was successful. Now, how to scale it up is a challenge. In India, Apollo is taking the lead in ensuring that we have green corridors dedicated to the drone for organ transplant especially. And initially they would be connecting their existing hospitals. But organ delivery is still a little far in our vision. Initially, we're just experimenting with regular medical deliveries. And the government of Telangana is taking a lead in this project. And very soon we would be having experiments being conducted in India for the medical deliveries. Lab samples. Now, lab samples, this is a project in Switzerland which is done with Swiss Post and Matinet. But we also had a lab samples, I don't have it here, but the lab samples are being delivered by the Nepal Flying Labs in at least 2 villages in Nepal over the last 1 year. And what they do is they have trained the local nurses and the local health workers in operating these drones. So once the health worker demands a drone, the drone is sent from the facility to this particular village. Then the community worker attaches the box of the collected samples of potential TB samples into it and sends the drone back to the lab facility. Now the lab processes the samples and sends the reports on the same day. So this has really reduced the load. This distance would have otherwise taken about 5 hours on road. Now it takes just 15 minutes. Now, mosquito control, this is an interesting project that was done in Fiji. Now, instead of killing the mosquitoes using pesticides, which again, some countries are doing it using drones, even in India, it's been tried. Now, what they do is they have modified mosquitoes, genetically modified mosquitoes, which are infected with a particular bacteria. That bacteria doesn't allow the transmission of mosquito-borne diseases like Zika or dengue or malaria. So what they do is they release these mosquitoes in the ecosystem, and these mosquitoes interact with other mosquitoes and pass on the infection to them. And that's how the entire mosquito population in the area is becoming now resistant to mosquito-borne diseases. Now, this is a very successful project which has been experimented in various countries, including South America. But now what they want to do is do it with drones, because otherwise they would just have bottles being sent from door to door, and they would engage with communities and explain them why this is important and ask them to release it in their backyard. Now with drones, it's becoming extremely easy because you can release about 6 lakh mosquitoes in one shot. So what they do is they put the mosquitoes to sleep by lowering the temperature, and then they take them to a particular height. They raise the temperature to a particular limit wherein the mosquitoes are again active. Then they're released in the atmosphere. And this recently we released a report of how effective this method has been. As I told you about disasters, not just response, but even mapping the vulnerability before a disaster happens, drones can be extremely useful in that. Response again, now this was what we did in Maharashtra. So Maharashtra, we have very active teams who have learned with us, and now they're ready to respond to disasters. And we did it in Kolhapur, we did it in Thane, in Bhiwandi, in various places. Detecting survivors, again, infrared drones have been extremely useful in doing that, and we are really recommending that for the emergency and the fire brigade in our country. And we are also trying to see if policies can be made around allowing these teams to use drones as soon as the emergency happens without waiting for the further approvals. Damage assessment, as I told you, now drones and drone-based data combined with artificial intelligence is extremely useful in classifying the damage as well. You can have minor damages, major damages, and complete damages being classified using AI. And this really reduces the task of the team, and it also brings in accuracy and transparency to the whole project. Reconstruction monitoring, this was done by a team in Nepal when the earthquake had struck there, and they were able to recreate the whole damage scene using the drone data, a 3D model. And this really helped the authorities decide or plan out the reconstruction, even allocate budgets, allocate teams, make a whole plan. Community engagement, this is again from Nepal after the earthquake had struck. So not just mapping the whole community using drones, they also engaged with the local communities and shared the printed maps back with them and asked them to mark out various buildings that they think should be looked at. And the communities came together, they marked open places, the hospitals, the clinics, the schools, any building which would have vulnerable population like older people or children, and they got into it like a team. So Teaming up with community is extremely important during disasters, making them a part of the solution, taking them along with you. Flood monitoring and rapid assessment. Now, as you can see on the left-hand side, generally after floods, after a heavy rainfall, you have a cloud cover. So even if you try to take a satellite image, it's not really useful. And but when you fly a drone, you could be as low or as high as you want. And this really helps in monitoring the floods. Flood impact analysis and flood modeling is one big application which GIS professionals use. They generally do it with the satellite data, but drone data has become extremely useful in doing it more effectively. Landslide monitoring. Now this is again Nepal, wherein our teams in Nepal use it for, they still are doing it in one of the villages in Nepal. They just came back from there in Dolkha, and they monitor these landslides. They recreate or reconstruct the landslide, and this really helps in planning the population, what do you say, relocation, the relocation of the population which is living along the landslide vulnerable zones. And this is something which even we can think about, because now, so after the Kerala floods, landslides have become like really frequent, especially in Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. Same thing, rapid assessments and rebuilding plans. Sewage clearing. Now this is one team which was in Kerala, which had come up with this huge robot for cleaning the sewage. Now, this appears bulky, but I'm sure with more innovation, it can become more lean. Land rights, I already spoke about it. Land management plans. Youth empowerment is something that we have to really think about. Wherever we go and work on our projects, we ensure that we are interacting with the local children so that they see what we are doing. They get inspired by what is being done, and then they can even plan or dream about drones in the future. So encouraging drone in the STEM education is one important goal that we are really looking at. And not just for boys, even for girls, this is very important. And we have seen that when we bring drones to even tribal populations, wherein they have never seen a drone before, and when you give them a drone, an educational nano drone like a Tello, they really feel excited, and they fly it absolutely comfortably and conveniently. So we really need to remove the fear from the minds of children that technology is something that you cannot touch upon, or you cannot fail, or you cannot crash them. We are also looking for more drones. Now, DJI Tello is one which we like, but we don't want to depend on. We're looking at the Indian models as well, which could be deployed in these situations. And I would really love to see if any of you have these kind of crashable drones which can be used by the kids and for education. And the only thing that we want is, one, when it crashes, it does not break. Second, when you launch it, it does not quiver. It has to be stable. Stability and crashability are the two things that you're looking at, and of course the affordability. So I really encourage you to be a part of it, and I really would love to stay in touch with all of you. Do join us, our mentors group on Facebook, for if you want to be mentoring these little children from schools and colleges and learning and teaching them about different technologies, especially drones and robotics and AI and IoT and sensors. Come along. You can join us as consultants and knowledge experts. You can join a rapid response task force and get trained in using drones and drone-based data for disasters and emergencies, and share your technology with us. We really love working with technologists. Whatever technology you have, see if it can work in some of our projects, and we would love to introduce you to all our partners in India as well as internationally, and then you have the opportunity of working with 30 countries at the same time. So this is our proposition to you, and we would really love to hear from you. I'm available on my email as well as on my LinkedIn, and you can follow us on various social media. Love to see you around. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for highlighting this real life use cases of drones. It was indeed an informative session.
You're welcome.